This conference will now be recorded.
It's now been recorded. So yeah. So apologies for being late. I've just been down to a play production of something called The Permanent Way, which is tells the story of obviously the Southall, the Ladbroke Grove, the Potters Bar, and the Hatfield train accidents. And at the end of it, they wanted me as the president of the PWI to stand up with the cast and have some photographs. So that production ran on a bit, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, but hopefully that's not too inconvenient. So thanks everyone for giving me the slot. I'm just going to really just talk a bit about myself, a little bit about the jobs that I've done, and really that's a kind of proxy for the opportunities for professional development that are in the railway industry. Then I'm going to talk about the job I'm doing now in my mainstream job, which is safety. I'm a PWI engineer through, by history, as it were, but safety, and certainly my year in the chair, I want to make sure that I multiply the collective intellect and talent of the PWI to drive the safety agenda as hard as we can. So on my opening slide, by the way, you may wonder why I've got a kangaroo on the opening slide. The safety task force that I'm leading for Network Rail, we've had a number of other railways approach us and ask for help. And at the moment, the safety task force are helping SNCF in France, believe it or not, also Transport New South Wales and Sydney Trains, and Network Rail Consulting in Australia, and also Irish State Railways as well. So I'm going to use those opportunities with foreign railways also to build stronger connections with the PWI. And indeed, I've got a meeting this Wednesday night with the president of the Australia section. So it's an international week for me. Right, I'll get cracking. And like I said, I'm just telling a story of my career, and really it's a proxy for the great opportunities that exist within the railway industry to professionally develop as a practicing engineer. So when I was at school, I didn't have a clue what it is that I wanted to do. My best mate from school, we've seen in this slide here on the right hand side, is a chap called Spike, and me and Spike were best mates, and we're still friends now. I remember speaking to Spike when I was at primary school and saying, Spike, what are you going to do when you leave school? And he said, I'm going to be a chartered accountant. I thought, that's brilliant. What is it? I didn't have a clue what it was. And I thought, well, I'm going to be a chartered something or other. I'm going to be a chartered engineer. And that stuck with me ever since primary school. And I never lost sight of it. So that's how me becoming a chartered engineer started. And I didn't even know what it was, to be honest, when I made that commitment to myself to do it. Incidentally, I don't regret it. So my dad, when I left secondary school, my dad wanted me to go to university, and I didn't really want to go to university at that time. I left secondary school 32 years ago now, and I had a selection of GCSEs. Not all of them were A's, and like I said, I wanted to make my own way. And one of my mum's friends came to me with a newspaper called the Express and Echo in Exeter and said, Nick, there's a really good opportunity for an apprenticeship with British Rail. You may want to think about it if you don't know what to do. So I applied for it, and I came second in the interview. And then about a week later, British Rail rang me up and said, the person we were going to offer the job didn't want it. Would you like it? And I said, absolutely, I'd like it. And I became an apprentice for British Railways in 1990. And I'm really pleased that after years of or suppressed apprenticeships through the 90s, it's great inside Network Rail, and I know others do it as well. It's great to see apprenticeships back in full flight. Just last week, I was talking to apprentices on the PWI stand at Railtex, and it was really refreshing. And I'm going to go and see the Network Rail apprentices in October, the new intake, and talk to them about my journey, about their journey, and how the PWI can help them with their journey. So I became an apprentice for what was British Rail. Excuse me a second. I didn't go straight into kind of any management job. I spent about 10 years on the tools, and I really enjoyed it. I used to fix and operate tampers. I became a PWI technical person. I did setting out, I did designs, I did time on site. And you can see there's a picture here. I'm actually putting in drains, and that was in the late 90s, which was, again, during those times, it was unusual to have drainage systems put in, because you know, it was all about, at the time that I remember, it was all about putting in track, but drainage had gone out of fashion. So I did my day release, I did my HNDs, I've got a mechanical and electrical HND, but then I diverted into civil engineering when I came onto the PWI, and that became my kind of core discipline then, civil engineering. But behind that, I was a fully qualified tamper fitter, an on-track machine fitter. I've still got my tools to this day, which are really helpful when you're trying to fix the lawnmower and things like that. But I do still, when I speak to people like Andy Crago, for those of you who know Andy interviewed me from school, and I still talk to people on the on-track machines from when I was there, and we wax lyrical about the various faults and maintenance trials and tributes for on-track machines. And I really enjoyed, working with the machines. I really enjoyed site work, and it gave me an amazing grounding to understand what was, some of the principles of what was to follow. However, in about 20 years ago, when Railtrack were in the chair, and contractors, and certainly the contractor I was with at the time, was struggling to make money, I was issued a redundancy notice. I thought my time in the railway was finished. I genuinely thought, well, that's it. There's nowhere for me to go now. It was a compulsory redundancy notice, and that was it. I thought I was off. So I thought, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to go to university, and I applied and got a position at Plymouth University. But I had to work out my notice for what was, what was Amy Rail at the time. And in that time, the Hatfield train crash happened. And many of you here will probably remember the Hatfield train crash. In fact, the play that I've just seen downstairs in the theatre here in London was about the Hatfield rail crash. I remember it very well. And when Hatfield happened, my redundancy notice was revoked. And my boss said, you can't have it anymore. I said, well, hang on a minute, I've got a plan. I want to go to university. Surely there's a deal here where I can do some kind of weekend work and holidays, and I don't mind doing nights. And I really want to get my degree now. And that's what I did. I did for 3 years, immediately after Hatfield, I did a civil engineering degree, but also kept going. I did full summer work. I did surveying work. I did designs, PWI designs. And there's all sorts of things that I could do whilst being able to study civil engineering. Excuse me, to have a quick drink there. And I even got to wear a special hat and get photographs. And here we are, here's me. None of you will know the lecturers, I'm sure, but I basically, it was quite useful. I got 100% in my hydraulics exam, but when I did the hydraulics coursework, I'd had the benefit of doing drainage work. Geotechnics and surveying were also subjects I really enjoyed, but I enjoyed it because I'd done it at the sharp end. Maths wasn't one of my strongest ones, although I did get through. And to this day, I've continued to help Plymouth University. I sit on the Industrial Advisory Committee to the University of Plymouth School of Engineering. And one of the things I've always done is I've always made a point of giving time back. There are people throughout the railway industry that have helped me. And for those of you that have seen my LinkedIn post, I put one up recently, people like Phil Ransom, Rob Brighouse, and other members of the Permanent Way Institution that have helped me. And it's for me, my payback is that I help others. One of the people that I do help is obviously the University of Plymouth and the University of Exeter, and it's a real pleasure to remain in touch with the academic institutions and see the talent that's coming through. After I left university, there wasn't a professional development pathway in Permanent Way Engineering, but that was the discipline that I was in. So it's great now that the Permanent Way Institution can provide those professional development pathways of Eng Tech, iEng, and CEng. I felt as though in my career, before I got my degree, I'd hit a glass ceiling. There were, I always had desires to get on in life, and but I was being knocked back and there were graduates that I saw in the railway industry that were not being knocked back, as it were. So after I left university, I became a chartered engineer with the ICE, and instantly became a supervising civil engineer, something that I do to this day, and I supervise graduates that are coming through on the graduate training scheme for Network Rail. In fact, I've got 2 graduates that are sitting there, chartered professional reviews with the ICE in the autumn here, and I've got others that I help on the Network Rail training scheme, and I have ever since I was chartered myself. So after leaving, after achieving chartered engineer status, I beg your pardon, some jobs that I've done on the way, as it were. I think I might have Stephen Barber on the call. We bought a hell of a lot of track relaying equipment for the Western route. We bought the high output track renewals kit, and I worked on the program introducing high output track renewals to the UK, and putting together the plan for the first 600 miles of track renewals, and that was excellent. I really enjoyed that job. The Great Western Main Line, the 125 miles an hour main line, was getting a bit tired. I was working with Railway Plant. It was game changing what we were doing. You know, we were handing. I know we've done high speed handbacks in the past, but we were working adjacent line open. We were getting faster and faster with handbacks, and the volumes that we were delivering night upon night were increasing. And it was a real kind of lean, continuous improvement journey using brand new cutting edge European track relaying equipment. So I really enjoyed that role. And there is the picture of the high output track relay. That's Christian Malford, somewhere near Chippenham, and there's an awful lot of sleepers going in the ground there at Christian Malford, as you can see by that photograph. After high output was fully established, I went on to as a development into a development role. And for those of you that remember the old Reading and now compare it to the new Reading, I worked on the Reading redevelopment programme and put together the development of the station, the track layouts, the civil engineering to grip stage 3, and worked with the team there that secured the funding from the Department of Transport and others. And I remember leaving. I worked in Reading probably for a couple of years, and I remember leaving Reading knowing full well that the whole place was going to really change, but almost not believing it was going to, because when you look at the old Reading station with the 1980s bolt on the side, and then you look at the Great Western part of it, and the Reading West Junction, and then you see what's there now. It's such a dramatic change. But for me, every time I go through Reading, I came through Reading this morning, I look at Reading, I still feel tremendously proud to have played a part in the Reading programme, and like I know there are many other programmes, Birmingham New Street and various other upgrades, electrification schemes and railway regeneration schemes, and it really shows off the talent that we in the railway industry have got as engineers. I went back to track renewals for a little while. I took on a job as a safety and assurance director for IP Track. At the time, we were turning over about £1 billion worth of track renewals across the country, and that was really my first job as a director. And it was a bit daunting, really. But it was, when I say it was a bit daunting, I guess the thought of being a director was daunting. The actual job itself wasn't daunting. In terms of safety and assurance, engineering assurance and construction safety, it was all stuff that I'd grown up with, and I was taught by good people to do things properly. And with regard to the safety and assurance director role for the new IP Track, I just followed those core principles and do things properly, do things well, plan things well, have good assurance, good data, and the right things happen. After and you can see some really nice, like I said, I'm a bit of a plant fanatic, but you can see here the tilting wagons. That's Haywood Road at Westbury. You can see the Kirov cranes. That was the Greenford track relaying job, and also things like Pemlems. That's Didcot. But I also went on from the safety role to take on a client director's job for track renewals, and for a period of time I was Steve Featherston's deputy, and I basically wrote the checks on the track renewals programme. So basically, the work banks and the client role in terms of CDM for a track renewals programme that was 750 to £1 billion a year, and that was again another job. And there's a theme emerging here. I've enjoyed all my time as I've come through the railway industry, and certainly the track renewals jobs that I did and the track enhancements, again, it gave me the ability. It was a national role, so I made lots of colleagues, friends around the country, and like I said, there was an amount of trailblazing with new high output kit and new cranes and all that sort of good stuff. I then went to work for Mark Kahn for a while as a chief executive, and I was the chief of staff for Network Rail. Interesting, really. I'm not really a political animal. I'm more of a kind of hands-on engineer than I am a kind of politician, and that remains the same today. But it was interesting to see how the politicians work, the Department of Transport, the ORR, RAIB, and also we had a fairly wide-ranging report, the Shaw report, which at the time was advocating the kind of dismantling of Network Rail, and we had to put together a plan to answer the Shaw report. And whilst I was at the chief of staff role, Scottish devolution, which still is a hot topic, but that was a topic that was raging at the time, and some of the political approaches to how Network Rail are in Scotland. It was just interesting as an observer to see that agenda, as it were. But also what happened whilst I was the chief of staff was the Brexit vote. I think whatever your politics, and this is not necessarily a political presentation, I think that took everyone by surprise, and still probably has. But we're there now. We're out of Europe, and time moves on. So after the chief of staff role, I was there for approximately a year. Like I said, I'm more of a hands-on type engineer. So for me, it was time to get back, roll up my sleeves and get my orange back on. And I took on the maintenance director job on Western Route whilst they were electrifying it. Now, it's a route I know particularly well. It's where I grew up. And, I have a huge amount of respect for the people that maintain the railway. It's a relentless task, a continuum. And there are always challenges. There's never enough money. Train performance is never good enough. And there was a huge amount of investment going into Western, resignaling of Oxford, of Swindon, of Bristol, the Filton 4-track project, Crossrail, the Great Western electrification, and much more. And to keep a railway safe and compliant whilst all that's going on is, it was a very challenging time, but again, one that I enjoyed. I introduced plain-line pattern recognition, 1,400 miles of it, a lot more risk-based maintenance, intelligent infrastructure, and it was a time where it was good to see the introduction of new fleets, the IET fleet, and the 387s, new electric fleets to the Western Route, and also the Crossrail introduction of the 345s. Whilst 1 minute we're dealing with ETS signalling at Heathrow, next minute it's lever frames signalling in Cornwall or Worcester. So basically, in terms of a railway repertoire, the Western Route had virtually everything from the Victorian days to the very very most present day. And that was a job, and that still is my substantive job, albeit I'm on a secondment at the moment. But certainly there, in terms of dealing with railways as a system, OHLE engineering, I learned a hell of a lot about OHLE when I was there, and it's really good that the PWI now can offer career development pathways for OHLE engineers. And obviously the next president next year will be Peter Dearman, and one of the things that I will be doing this year is making sure that we gear up, as well as our kind of core track base, making sure that whilst I'm driving the safety agenda this year, that I make a very or help work with Peter to lay a really sound foundation for the future of the PWI with OHLE engineering and professional development pathways. So the last 2 years for me have been slightly different. For those of you that know me, and I know some of you won't, I've always had a keen interest for safety. I'm firmly of the opinion you can drive safety to a much better place, and certainly you get in life what you focus on. If you don't focus on safety, I'll be very surprised if you get good safety performance. And certainly when I took on the role as the Western Route maintenance lead, I focused on safety, but in focusing on safety, train performance and cost performance went in the right direction with it. And we were able, certainly in Western, with things like LTIFR and some other safety measures, we drove about a 40% improvement over 3 years. It's hard graft, but we focused on it and we got improvements for it. Now, in July 2019, Gareth and Spike were sadly struck and killed by whilst working with an unofficial lookout system on the South Wales main line. Now, on Western, one of the work streams that I was actively driving was an eradication of open line working. I'm not a fan of open line working. I never have been. And if you look at the health and safety legislation, and if you look at the technology and the talent we've got in the industry, we should not need to put human beings on open railways. Fast moving metal trains and human flesh do not mix. And we've proven that time and time and time again. And I know there are many members of the institution that have had first-hand experience of being in areas or indeed possibly involved with some of these tragic incidents. In fact, we were having somewhere near 70 near misses every year, and approximately 150 to 200 colleagues were involved in those near miss events up until the point of when Margam happened. Anyway, I was asked to put together a programme nationally to drive safety improvement with regard to separation between track workers and trains. And for the last 2 years, that's what I've been doing. Now, when Gareth and Spike were sadly killed, we did 30,000 hours a week with lookout flags. And when you read the 019 standard that says lookouts are basically the last resort, 25% of our work was being done using a warning method of last resort. And quite simply, that's not right. I know myself as a head of maintenance, I had asset managers and train operator customers saying to me, Nick, you're not having any more access. You can just do it at the lookout flag. And I'm sorry, I was just not passing the buck down to the section managers and down to the frontline teams. I'd had one too many near misses with lookout systems and loud systems in my railway history, and I'm afraid that was a place where I was not going to go. And I'd certainly put in place mechanisms to eradicate open line working, and I was able to multiply that approach across the country. Now, as a permanent way institution and all of the various individual and corporate members, I'm really pleased that we've managed to up our game everywhere. If you look at risk-based maintenance and faster ways to apply risk-based maintenance, if you look at intelligent infrastructure, if you look at plain-line pattern recognition, if you look at eddy current testing for rails, and there are other things that we're experimenting now with S&C measurement, and also other kind of modern technology and equipment that we use in machine learning. There is a solution to every one of our problems. I'm convinced of it. And what's happened over the last 2 years is I've seen the safety agenda drive genuine innovation, which in itself will drive safety performance and cost efficiency. Sadly, since Gareth and Spike were killed, we've had 2 further fatal accidents. Now, Aidan lost his life at road in Northamptonshire, and the background for Aidan, as far as I'm aware, and I speak with our investigators and the team, is that Aidan took a decision after handing back a line block when COVID first struck to walk down the live side of a Vortop fence. And the reason why he did that, as far as I'm aware, is that he was worried that there were too many people inside the safe side of a Vortop fence, and he was worried about COVID transmission. The line block was handed back. A split-second lapse, that's all it takes with some of these safety events. A split second, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a train, he was struck and fatally injured by the train. In February of this year, in the last 18 months before February of this year, we'd made about a 70% reduction in open line working across Network Rail, and we got some really good analysis, and it was really clear that high-speed railways, high-frequency railways, S&C locations, unassisted lookout working, and approaches to stations, there were some key common factors, and also midweek mornings was another one. There were some really key common factors in our near-miss data and our fatality data. And Tyler was sadly struck and killed inspecting S&C near Surbiton. And that really was a further wake-up call, if ever we should need it, that unassisted lookout working and working with lookout operator warning systems has had its day on our railway. And some further slides, and I've shared these before in other presentations. You can see this is the near miss data for the control period. I've had many conversations with people that love lookout working. When you look at the statistical norms of near misses, and if you look at the relationship with speed as well, we should not be working on open railways. And indeed, our safety regulator agrees. And after the Margam event, had served us with 2 legally enforceable safety improvement notices, which effectively, although they don't explicitly say it, they are targeting the removal of unassisted lookout working. And you know, one of my primary objectives at the moment is to satisfy those notices, but it's more than satisfying the notices. It's making sure that we get our teams the safest possible plan with our, you know, and the right safety equipment, and don't transfer the risk. So for the last 2 years, signal workload, line blockages, safety equipment deployment, negotiating better access with our train operator customers has been the forefront of what I've been doing. We've now made a 97% reduction in lookout working since Margam. We do less than 1,000 hours a week now with lookout flags, and we were at 30,000 hours a week. And there are 9 routes now that don't work with lookout flags, and every route director in the country is committed to finishing with unassisted lookout working by the end of this calendar year. So it will be certainly a day for me to remember, but I think it's one where the industry should mark, you know, the lookout, retiring of the lookout competence, as it were, the lookout flag. Last week I was in Manchester, and I was reading about the first person struck and killed by a train on the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, and that was in 191 years ago, in September of 1830, and it was the MP for Liverpool, and the train was doing, I think, 16 miles per hour. I hope, genuinely hope, that in the work that we've done with removing lookout working, we will see an end to accidental situations where track workers have sadly struck and killed by trains. So the programme I've been leading, basically no more lookouts, much more safety equipment to provide additional protection for planned line blockages, and also we're overhauling our 019 standard to make it simpler, to make the safety roles simpler, and to make compliance with those with the standard simpler as well. So basically we're introducing a new planning system called RailHub, which is a simplified planning system. Line blockage planning will become an online activity as well, and we're simplifying the standard, and we're also consolidating the safety roles. So some of you may well know, obviously we've got the controller of site safety, we've got the person in charge, we've got the safe work leader, and we've got various guidance notes and level 3 and level 2 parts of the standard, and basically I'm going to simplify the lot, and we've got plans in place to do that. We've done a lot of engagement with staff. You can never do enough engagement with staff, in my view. There's no point making victims of teams. You've got to take the front line with you with whatever we do. And certainly the Safety Task Force has spent a considerable amount of effort, albeit during COVID times, still out talking to our front line. We've managed to use Teams quite effectively. But we've also spent, and I've certainly myself, for those of you that follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I post a video blog once a week, roughly, that focuses on specific topic areas, but generally surrounding visits that I do to frontline. And I would encourage all of you to set aside a proportion of your time and do safety assurance conversation type visits, because whatever you think might be going on out there probably isn't. And you won't, unless you engage with proper dialogue with those frontline teams, you never really understand truly the challenges that they're facing, and therefore you would never really know specifically how to target the help that you can bring. We're doing some really simple stuff. We're upgrading walkways, and we're upgrading access points, which I know will be music to a lot of track engineers' ears. But when I think about, what role can the Permanent Way institution play here, there'll be members that undertake designs for railway infrastructure. Don't forget the basics. Locating railway assets away from the strike zones of trains, making sure that there are good access to and from those assets with places of safety. And these sorts of simple, basic safety equipment will enable us to drive safety in a number of ways. It means that we don't have to do maintenance work so much on nights. It means that we don't have to take line blockages for walking, and therefore signal workload is reduced. And obviously there's the mental health issue and fatigue issue that goes with if we have to put people on nights because there are no line blockages during the day or walkways, then that's obviously a self-inflicted wound. So we've got about 4,000 CES pathway upgrades and many hundreds of access points being upgraded, and that program will continue. I'm going to put the CES pathway firmly back on the agenda, with putting it in ellipse, making sure that we've got inspection frequencies, but also securing investment through the next control period to make sure the basics of safety equipment for our frontline track workers are taken care of. Loads of technology. We're deploying now, obviously, eddy current for rolling contact fatigue. But in the last year, we've switched on another 3,000 miles of plane line pattern recognition. And there are ways that we can take human beings out of strike zones with trains. And I would suggest that should be a focus for everybody. Do not take the risk if you do not need to take the risk, and you can plan to avoid it using great equipment like the stuff in this photograph here. We're also experimenting with new kit. S&C measurement is the latest. I think I'm right in saying 3 new S&C inspection trains have just been released from Derby on test, which will be great because they'll be able to do loaded geometry measurements through S&C in traffic as well, which is great. And that will help track engineers take a more risk-based approach to S&C maintenance. And obviously you can see here we're experimenting with drones as well to help us. And that's a trial. It's not, we haven't got sign off for the trial yet, but we're looking at all possible ways to basically take track workers off the track. And generally there are ways of doing that. Certainly this year, I mean, we've had a fairly calm year with hot weather, but the track engineers were really worried about hot weather management. And I'm pleased to say that this year we've had, whilst we've been ramping down on open line working, it's given us the opportunity with not so much heat to really think about how do we manage permanent way in hot weather in the future, when you consider a new constraint, which is you can't put a human being on an open railway. So that conundrum is still ongoing, but I'm pleased that the track engineers are taking the challenge seriously and are finding novel ways to manage that. We're also developing brand new technology, such as this one here, which is geofencing. And for those of you that deliver projects with on railway infrastructure, and you have to do that perhaps if there are some possessions with adjacent lines open, this kit, we've just completed the trial at the end of August. We're going to union consultation now. This kit is really great. It's smaller than a mobile phone. You wear it in your top pocket, as it were, and it's got an audible warning. It's got a vibrating alert and a flashing light alert, and you can set a polygon or a shape around a very accurate railway map, and it will warn you when you come to the outer extremities. And certainly I recall in my railway history, poor old Jason Wilkinson was struck and killed at Acton. He was outside of the possession doing a task, but equipment such as this would have saved his life. So there's an opportunity here for all of you that do work on open railways to perhaps consider this type of equipment to keep your team safe. Another thing that I'm doing as well is rationalising the competency framework for track workers. So one of the things that we're doing right away, and that will start now, is that we split the lookout competence from the site warden competence. We've got 12,000 lookouts in Sentinel, and I'm encouraging everyone now that we've split the site warden competence to proactively take down the lookout competence. Indeed, Gary Hearn, who's the IMDM, the maintenance manager for Cardiff, where the delivery unit where Port Talbot, Peway and Margam is situated, just last week, Gary took down all 427 of his lookout certificates from his team because they no longer need them anymore. And that's a real tribute to Gary there. Over the period of 2 years, he's completely modernised his maintenance plan to a point where he doesn't need lookouts, and he's proactively taken down the lookout competence, and I applaud Gary for doing that. But we're also going to reduce the amount of COSs that we've got on the railway and IWAs. We don't need as many as we've got, and I believe that people hold competences because they feel they should, and I also believe that people hold IWA as a port of convenience, and we're going to put an end to that practice as well. So the new competence that we are proving in terms of concept, which should be done this side of Christmas, will be a new person in charge competence that will merge safe work leader and costs to a new person in charge. But with that new person in charge, we're also going to have a tiered system where by default a director's got to sign off if you are going to work on open lines, because we don't want people working on open railways, simply put. We'll also have a sign-off system that if you work with track worker safety systems such as SATWAS or indeed additional protection kit, that you get the proper training for it and your PIC certificate is endorsed. And for those of you that work in T3s that don't work with track worker safety systems or on open lines, then we're not going to train you for it because we don't want you to do it. So basically there'll be less people competent. We'll train those people better, and we'll restrict competence for those that work on open lines to the very minimum, rather than having, like we've got at the moment, 28,000 COSs, a further 11,000 IWAs, 12,000 lookouts. A lot of those people do not need those competences. We can improve and target the training in the future, save money, and create more competent and capable individuals by doing so. This presentation will run with me all year, and certainly when you look at the flow of this presentation, I wanted to pick up on professional development and tell my own personal story. I think I've done that in the first few slides. The safety journey for me is one that I'll forever be on, and I would say to all PWI members, if you think you're doing enough with safety now, you're probably not. You could do more. You can multiply the efforts of your team. You can innovate more. You can do more assurance. And I would suggest that we've got a moral duty to do all of those things. So the safety journey, which is the middle bit of this presentation, is really important. I also think there are other challenges, and for those of you that have read my opening statement as the president and the next PWI journal, I build on that. I think we've got a great opportunity in the railway industry in a number of ways. We've got some threats. I mean, at the moment, obviously with COVID, passenger numbers are down. Although I have noticed in the last few weeks, those numbers are increasing. I was in Birmingham and Manchester last week, and the stations were both really busy. I came to London this morning from the West Country, and the trains and the stations were busy, which is great to see that we've got people now returning to offices. Leisure travel has been quite strong through the summer, but we've got to secure enough revenue to sustain our industry, and at the moment there's more to do in that space. But I think we've got a great opportunity. If you look at low carbon forms of transport, we've got a really good offering, and we can make it better. So we've got in the Permanent Way Institution, like I said, we've got Peter as the president next year, and our challenge has got to be, how do we drive a very low carbon form of transport, and how do we make electrification systems cheap to install but still high quality? What do we need to do with regard to Permanent Way to optimize and reduce the carbon footprint in terms of how do we prolong the life of assets? How do we how do we make sure that we get as much railway use from the assets that we've got? The concrete, the ballast, and the sleepers, are all carbon hungry, and I'm sure with focus we can reduce the carbon footprint. But we've also got a huge railway estate when it comes to biodiversity, and we've got to be we've got to be in tune with that. And indeed, there are lots of opportunities with our enhancement schemes to really use nature to balance our railway offering. So there's a great opportunity for us here now. We've got the COP26 summit in a few weeks' time. We Network Railway are putting on a show for that. We're taking battery-powered trains and hydrogen trains to Scotland. We've got electrification systems, the Great Western, the Midland Main Line. There's quite a lot going on in Scotland, and I noticed, I think I'm right in saying that last week there was an announcement in the Northwest for more electrification schemes. So for us, I think we've got a great future in the railway industry. We just need to play to our strengths and play well. So, excuse me. that's my kind of presidential kind of opening presentation. For those of you that want to know a little bit more about the task force, you can email the Safety Task Force at safetytaskforce@networkrail.co.uk. But for those of you, if you want to follow what I'm doing as the president, or indeed as the Safety Task Force director, I do quite a lot on LinkedIn. And I would suggest, if you want, and I'm going to start putting specific PWI postings up shortly. I've been speaking with Luke, who's our who does a lot of our marketing and comms material, and just today I've had material that will help me edit and put up permanent way orientated promotional blogs as the president, which I intend to do. I'm a proud permanent way person, and I'll make sure as the president this year I do my level best to promote the events, and I know there are many this year, and also promote the profession and secure as much membership and professional development as I can physically get away with in my year as the president. So if you want to follow what I'm up to, or indeed if you want to prompt me to do things, follow me on LinkedIn and put some proposals to me. And if I can do those, you know, if I can help you with your sections or your meetings, or indeed the things that you're up to, please do ask. I'll do my best to help. Anyway, that's me done. I don't know how to stop sharing my screen. I think I've got a green icon here.